What's going on, everyone? Your bearded egghead here, Hector Navarro, and I am, as always, going to let my guests introduce themselves. Thank you for being here on the podcast.
Thank you.
Please introduce yourself to the group, the viewers and the listeners.
I'm Dave Gallo. I own the Wing Chun Kung Fu Academy in Berlin.
Okay, awesome. So some of the questions that I'm going to ask basically here are just a little bit about your origin story. Like, where did you come from, how you grew up, and what kind of led you towards Wing Chun specifically?
Okay. Well, the backstory goes back quite a ways. My grandfather was actually a judo champion way back in the 50s. And back in those times, you really only had three arts. There was judo, karate, and boxing, and he did all three. And he actually trained with professional boxers at the time. My father was involved in it as well. He did judo, he did karate, he did boxing, with my grandfather. And I always took an interest in it. And even when I was 5 years old, they bought us gis, little karate gis.
What are those, the gis?
Yeah, the little white gis with a little white belt.
Okay.
They bought us for them.
Nice.
And it was nothing formal about it. It was just, some stuff in the kitchen or in the living room and stuff we would do. I always had an interest, even at about 5 years old. So on and off, they never really pushed it on us, but on and off, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 years old, we'd still continue to do it. We always had the punching bags downstairs and stuff like that, always.
Nice.
And always going through some stuff. And, by the time I was about 14 or 15, I really started getting an interest in it. And that's when all of the American Ninja movies started coming out and all sorts of stuff like that. And my cousin actually owned a school. And then when I was 17, he bought a school and invited me to train with him. And there was Wing Chun was part of the curriculum, and really? I just fell in love with Wing Chun. From my very first time seeing it, I fell in love with it at 17.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, this is what I want to learn.
What was it about it?
It was almost kind of like love at first sight type thing. It was like, I don't know, animal attraction. I have no idea. It just fascinated me.
Okay.
And, back then there was no such thing as Google. You had the yellow pages. And
what year was this?
1992. That's when I say I actually started my martial arts training. I don't count from the time I was 5, even though it was informal and I kept up with it. I don't count that time because you're little, you're a kid. You know what I mean? So what's the point of that? I don't feel like that's being truthful. So I like to tell people that I started it at 17.
You were introduced to it.
I was
at
introduced
a
to
younger
it.
age.
I was introduced to it and played around a lot with it when I was from about 5 to about 13, 14.
Wow.
Yeah, and then watching Rocky movies and stuff, and
Cool.
Hitting the bags to that and all that good stuff. But when I was 17, that's when I really, really had a dying passion for it. And back then, like I said, there was no Google. You just open up the yellow pages and I called everywhere to see if they had Wing Chun. And back then, we really didn't have much, so I just was able to train with my cousin and get as much information as I could, because once he had kids, the school kind of closed down.
Right.
And he just focused on being a father. So I just trained with him when I could and got as many videos as I possibly could and just kept up with it. And by the time I was about 20, there was a school in West Hartford that was teaching it downstairs, Wing Chun downstairs. So I started training with them. And then that school ended up closing shortly after. And then I ended up going to another school with another different style. I ended up meeting a close friend of mine. And he actually had a Wing Chun background. So I would go to his house and train Wing Chun. So I had a bunch of different Wing Chun lineages, all under Yip Man, but there were different lineages, different branches. And then we'd go to somebody else's house and we'd train with them. And then when I had a bunch of different Wing Chun instructors, some were legit, some were fake. And in 2010, I actually met my instructor, Master Keith Mazza, and have been training privately under him for the last 8 years.
Wow.
Yeah, so I solely train traditional Wing Chun, which is the Yip Man, Grandmaster William Chung lineage.
Right, and I think that's where a lot of millennials like myself tend to know Wing Chun from, the Ip Man, the Great Ip Man, Bruce Lee, and the old Netflix special.
Right.
which kind of I found interesting because it's this teacher, and he goes out and teaches a bunch of young men out in the streets, you know, and then teaches them how to defend themselves. They're from poverty-stricken communities, you know,
Right.
so walk me through, I guess, a little bit of the work that you do with some of the students here, like, aside from Wing Chun, like, obviously there's disciplines and there's things that you have to take into consideration, like,
Right.
what are some of the challenges and difficulties that you face with students that come here trying to...
Well, pretty much, you know, with Google, everybody pretty much when they're coming here are looking for Wing Chun.
Right.
I specialize mostly in adults. We have a kid program, and it is growing. And we teach Wing Chun to the kids, along with a mixed curriculum that I got from Master Keith Mazza, who, like I said, is my instructor. Everything that he sends me, we teach the kids. So it comes right from Grandmaster to Master Mazza, and Master Mazza puts some stuff of his own into it, and then he teaches me so I can teach, so we can teach the kids here. I personally do not teach the kids. I have people doing it, teaching the kids classes
Very nice.
for me. Because they're good at teaching kids. I am not good at teaching kids. And
Okay.
somebody told me once that work your strengths, hire your weaknesses. My strengths is teaching Wing Chun in a realistic setting. I'm retired law enforcement. I know this works. I was in law enforcement. I worked in the prison system. I worked as a parole officer. I put my papers in. I retired. I did my part. Now this is what I solely do. I do this full time now. So I know what I teach works, and I bring a lot of the realism into it. Not so much for the kids, but for the adults. And I think that's one of the things that makes me stand out, is there's a realism of fighting and knowing what to do in that type of situation. You know what I mean? In a realistic situation. I feel a lot of martial arts schools out there are just based on their belt, and the fighting aspect really isn't there. No offense to them. I don't suggest that they go out there and get into street fights, you know, just to prove that, you know, their black belt works. But I think that a lot of people fall into the confines of, well, he has a black belt, he must know how to fight, and that really is not the case. You know, unless you stand in front of somebody, you really don't know what it's like to go, you know, to know what your art, what you can do with your art,
Right.
unless you actually use it. And you hear people, they say, well, you know, I got into a fight at 7-Eleven in 1985. Well, nobody really cares about that, because who hasn't?
Right.
You know what I mean? You know, they'll say things like, well, you know, I used to fight in Subway. Well, okay, well, what's the difference between fighting in Subway and fighting in front of 7-Eleven? That doesn't make you a street fighter.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's just a rite of passage. Everybody growing up got into a
Fist
fight
fighters,
at one
so,
point in
right.
time or another. That
Sort of
doesn't make you a
tussle.
street fighter, right? You
Right.
know? So I really add my own personal experiences to what I teach to make it a very realistic setting for people, and I really think that they appreciate that, because
That's awesome.
you know, nobody here, I have a few people looking to compete and stuff like that, but for the most part, they're just general guys that just want to protect their families, and they want to come to somebody that says,
Interesting.
I can teach you how to do that.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
So what are some of the qualifications that you look for? Like, let's say I'm somebody that's interested in being an instructor
Mhm.
or teaching kids or being part of this program.
Mhm.
Like, what do you look for in somebody that you're teaching Wing Chun?
Like their character?
Like their character?
Honesty.
Okay.
Honesty is a big part, and I'll come back to that in a second. Loyalty to me and to the art. Showing that you're a good person, you generally care about students' progression. My job is to make my students better than me. Not to hold them back, not to hide stuff from them. I want to make them better than me. I don't have 15 belts that they have to pass. You know what I mean? I give them everything. I give them the written curriculum. I spend time with them. I give them free extra help. I don't offer,
Right.
I don't ask for money.
Right.
I'll stay with them. We actually, from like 8 o'clock to 8:30 is almost kind of like an open mat type thing where people can stay and ask questions. And I want to
That's
see
awesome.
you do better. It's not, okay guys, class is over, get out. It's not like that. These guys, I can't get them out of here sometimes. You know, sometimes their wives or girlfriends or whatever will call, where are you? Where are you? Don't tell me you're with me. You stopped off somewhere. Don't go get me in trouble. But I really look for honesty, and I wanted to come back to that because I think a lot of honesty is being pushed off to the side for money. You know what I mean?
People selling themselves?
Yeah, they're selling
just for the
themselves for something that they're not.
Okay.
You know what I mean? You could be a good salesman. I don't need to sell anything. The art sells itself. When I invite people in here for a free trial class, they'll call me up or they'll send me, they'll register online, and I'll get the email for their inquiry, and I'll call them back. And I'll ask them, you know, what are you looking for? What is it that you're looking to get out of this? Do you have any prior experience? And I don't say anything about myself. I ask them to come in for a free trial class, and I let the system sell itself. I don't need to sell the art. I don't need to sell anything. I'm confident in what I do. I teach one art here. We actually just started teaching a Chinese kickboxing class.
Cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's really taken off.
Cool.
Because not everybody's looking for Wing Chun. So I wanted to give something to somebody that I'm confident with, that they can also do. So we started a Chinese kickboxing class, which has really taken off, along with the Wing Chun program. And they kind of go hand in hand in regards to the fighting aspect and the self-defense aspect, but Wing Chun kind of focuses more on forms and the word of dummy and proper structure of blocks, where the Sanda or the Sanshao or Lei Tai or Chinese kickboxing, however you want to say it, focuses more just on the kickboxing, the sweeps, the ground stuff, the takedown stuff like that. But the honesty, I think, really, really is going astray. I actually did a seminar, I want to say about 6-7 years ago, for a buddy of mine.
Interesting.
And there was a guy that called me up and he asked me, he goes, hey, I saw the ad, can I come? I'm like, absolutely. I said, do you have any martial arts experience? And all the money went to St. Jude's Children's Hospital. I didn't take a dime of it.
Beautiful. That's awesome.
And he goes, yeah, I'm a black belt in Kempo. I said, okay, great, come on in. I invited a buddy of mine who was a black belt in Kempo in to train that I worked with in the prison system. And I had him work. I said, listen, you have the same background, work with this guy. Well, it turns out the guy had a school. And he goes, he called me up the next day after the seminar, and he says, what was that guy's issue? I'm like, I don't know, I really wasn't paying much mind to it. Why? And he goes, he said he was a black belt. He goes, he didn't move like one. He goes, I looked him up. He bought his black belt, and he bought a correspondence course, and he sold himself because he had a school. He sold himself like he knew that.
Wow.
And the reason why a buddy of mine knew that was because he contacted his instructor. He goes, yeah, he asked me to give him a black belt, and I refused to because when I brought him in the test, he wasn't above a yellow belt. But he bought the correspondence course, and I was like, and I think that there's a lot out there with YouTube and all of the video courses that you can get. I think people make them perceive themselves as something that they're not. And there's a lot of that out there.
Wow.
Yeah.
That eventually hurts the students themselves
Well,
because they're
exactly,
not teaching.
exactly. Okay, so you could be a backyard mechanic for 30 years, and you could say, oh, I've been teaching martial arts for 35 years. Well, you could be a backyard mechanic for 35 years. Well, bring one of these brand new cars to that backyard mechanic. Can he fix it? Probably not. You might be able to do brakes or an oil change, but even mechanics now have to put everything into a computer. Everything is, electronic now and stuff like that. Right. So regardless of how many years you've been teaching, doesn't mean that you're up to date. Exactly. Right. Just like technology. Technology is constantly changing. And with this MMA craze, why would you want to learn to fight like everybody else? You know what I mean? So I think people, like you had said, people take they change the honesty and the quality for money.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And of course, business is all about making money, but where does...
And that was my next question. I guess, so there's the aspect of having that integrity, having that honesty, and then people kind of separate themselves from that and compromise that in order to be able to make a quick buck. So being that you have honesty and integrity in your business, how is it that you upkeep this business? What are some of the business values that you could provide any small business entrepreneurs that are seeking to do their
quite thing? Honestly, I'm by myself here.
Okay.
I don't have 8 instructors like a lot of other people do. I obviously, you can see this is more of a warehouse, so it's not, right in the middle of a, in a plaza somewhere with a
Right.
strip mall or anything like that. So as you can see, the rent would be a little bit lower.
Mhm.
I do everything myself. I have some senior students that help me out from time to time when they're here, with people, but I pretty much do everything on my own, so my overhead is low.
Mm.
So that means that I'm allowed to keep the prices at a reasonable level without compromising my integrity, my honesty. Like, people
Right.
are out there charging people $300 a month, and what are they getting out of it? That's what I want to know. What are you getting out of it?
Mhm.
Why? So when people look for martial arts, they pretty much, for the mass population, they look for two things: convenience and price. What's the closest to my place? What's the closest to my home? And how much is it going to cost me?
Right.
Well, if you're in Avon or Simsbury, you can charge $300 a month.
Right.
Nobody's going to charge $300 a month in New Britain or New Haven or Waterbury.
Right.
Right?
So true.
Exactly. So it really depends on location, but just because you're in those locations doesn't mean that you are at the level where you can be teaching something
Mhm.
at a really good, like, that doesn't mean that you can actually use what you know.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So I mean, you could take somebody, oh yeah, well, I was IT tech for 10 years, I got out of it for 8. Well, that doesn't mean you could jump right back into it, because in those 8 years, a lot of things have changed in IT.
Right.
So, you got to kind of keep up with the changing of the
Very true.
paces, if I'm making sense here.
No, you are, absolutely. So a couple of the other questions that I
Mhm.
have here, and let me get to my questions.
Sure.
So what is it or how is it that you can develop discipline? Because I'm assuming it takes discipline to be able to learn through the process, to go through the process, to go from belt to belt to belt to belt. So
Sure.
discipline is a very strong factor to me personally. I
Okay.
come from the military background, so discipline is kind of like instilled in me.
Mhm.
Walk us through some of the disciplines that you do early in the morning, or you teach other individuals that are mentorees to you,
Sure.
that involve discipline, because I think they'll provide a really deep value to some of our listeners.
Sure, okay. So it's not so much self-discipline as I am as discipline motivated to offer my students what everybody else cannot. From the time I wake up in the morning, the first thing what I do, I come here. If nobody's here, by the time I get here, I'm training or I'm working on curriculum. By the time the students get in here, we're ready to rock and roll. After class is over, I have a 9:30 to 10:30 morning class. After that class is over, I'm either training on my own, I'm writing curriculum for the next class, or I'm going over my own curriculum to stay up to date with everything. Because you can only remember so much.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm constantly going over my curriculum over and over and over and over and over again, going back to basics, making sure that I can provide everybody exactly what they're looking for. And I think my motivation and my excitement and my determination to provide top-notch martial arts instruction here, I think people feed off of that, and that gives them the self-discipline and the energy to say, okay, I want to come back here. Okay, I can't wait for tomorrow's class. I mean, I got guys that are coming in an hour early for class, just warming up on the side when we got the kids here.
Wow.
They just can't wait to get here, and they'll call me up and they'll say, Dave, can you give me, can you send me a video on this? I'm not sure, and I'll absolutely send them a video of me performing what they're looking for. Not a problem at all. So I think that they feel that passion, and I think that my passion is what drives people. Somebody said to me not too long ago, you really got to have balance in life. Well, that's great if you work a Monday through Friday job and you work from 8 to 5, and then you go home and you have your family, you take your wife and kids up to dinner and stuff like that. From the second I get up to the second I go to bed, I'm doing Wing Chun. I'm doing something for the school. I'm here. I'm writing curriculum. I'm getting prepared for the next day. I'm training myself. You can never train enough. You can always get better at something. So like a lot of schools, like you see like 12-year-old instructors in there. Well, where's the head instructor? Well, he's in his office reading a book, or he's on a computer watching YouTube or whatever. I'm out here in the middle doing this. So from the time I get up to the time I go to bed, this is all I do.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So that level of consistency, just always getting
Always,
better
always.
and better at
And
your
I have
craft.
such a passion to want to give everybody the absolute best. And that never stops. It's just like it keeps like adding the fuel to a fire. And every time somebody new comes in, that gives me even more drive to go back to the basics, to give them the proper instruction so they can go home and they can take something and they can go home with it. None of my guys here care about belt rank. They really don't. They just want to learn. I can't even get them to wear their sashes. They don't care. They don't
That's
care
awesome.
about rank. Now, a lot of guys have been with me for 6 years now. I've been in this location for 5. I was in Weathersfield for about 2.5. So I got a lot of the guys have been with me for about 6, 7 years now, and they're not going anywhere.
Wow.
And
They're
and
loyal, like you said.
they
loyal.
really are. They really, really are. We have a very, very low turnover rate. We just keep getting new people in, and people say, "Yeah, we heard about you. How'd you hear about me? Oh, somebody was talking about you at McDonald's or something. We saw the shirt."
Wow.
And I go, "Oh yeah, I heard about that school." And
That's
I
awesome.
think that's awesome.
That is awesome.
Because my students are out there promoting for me. I really don't have to do anything because my passion and my determination, and they know I want to get them better than me. I mean, how many martial arts instructors can tell you that they want you better? They want their students better than them.
Right.
That's my job, to make you better than me. That's what I'm here for.
Right.
I'm not here to hold anything back.
Me and Rakeem had a discussion about that, about mentors and mentorees. And at times, the mentor tends to get jealous because the mentoree surpassed them. Have you ever been in that type of situation where you've had somebody that you've taught just get better than you, and how do you deal with that?
I have not, no, because my training is in a consistent motion going forward. If my instructor, Keith Mazza, is not coming here, then I'm going out there and training with him constantly. I'll grab one of my students, "Hey, come on, let's train," and we'll just throw punches. We'll start doing Chisao or something. I'm constantly keeping up with my training. So if I'm concerned about my students getting better than me and I don't like that, then I need to train harder.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I'm not going to
so
hold
true.
somebody back because I'm not going to pull up on my part. If I'm not pulling the weight, then I deserve to get beat by a student. But if I am pulling the weight, then I don't need to worry about that. There's no reason for jealousy. Then I've done my job. It's no different than a professor in college. A professor in college does not hold stuff back from you. He gives you everything you need to pass that course. Well, it's the same thing here. And if the professor's so concerned about it, then he needs to go back to school and learn more.
So true.
It's just that simple,
Right. Right.
And I think that there's a lot of people out there. And I also think that a lot of people are held back by belts. Nowadays, people will say, okay, so for example, I know a lady who pays about $180 a month for classes for her child. And I'm like, okay. But it's not just $180, it's the extra $50 a month for the stripe test. And another $50 a month, month after that for another stripe test. And then they do $100 a month for another belt test. And I'm like, well, you're not paying $180 a month. You're paying $230 a month for your child to take this class just so he can get their black belt?
Jeez.
And like, why? I'm the only one around here that does not test for belts. I have no no charge for belt testing. I refuse to charge for belt testing. Like I said, my students don't even care about the rank. They just want to know that they can defend themselves. What good is a belt if you can't use it? And I think people fall into that, well, I'm going to get my black belt in 2 years. Well, okay. Well, if you can get a bachelor's degree in 2 years, do you think you can go to the school and say, well, I'll give you $10,000 right now if you give me my bachelor's degree? That's not going to happen. You have got to put in the work. They want to make sure, that you're doing the work, that you're doing the homework. The professors, they don't care if you show up or not. They're still getting paid by the university.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So if you take shortcuts, what good is that? I mean, I can buy you a black belt, for $10 online. You go to Amazon and buy a black belt if you want
Put
it.
it around you. But
Exactly.
it
Why
doesn't
spend the
mean
money
that you
for it? Exactly. So, it almost kind of like, okay, well, I want to be a mechanic. Well, let me go to, Goodwin College and give you $5,000 to give me my certificate. Well, that doesn't mean you know how to work on cars. So I think a lot of that happens up because people want to see very fast progression. Well, one of the things about Wing Chun is it's very simple to learn and very easy to apply. You don't need to learn 50 different katas to know how to fight.
What's a kata?
Katas are just the forms that they learn in karate. It's basically just motions. It's basically what separates arts from each other.
Gotcha.
You know, they all basically have. If you go from school to school to school to school. Say you have a Kempo school, a Taekwondo school, a Shorin-ryu school, a Shotokan school. Well, what really separates them? They all have the same blocks. They all have the same kicks. They all have the same punches. They all break boards. What really separates them from each other? Well, it's usually the katas. Well, they'll say, well, you know, when you're a white belt, then you do this kata. Well, this style will say, well, no, we do this kata here. Well, no, we do this kata here.
Mm-hmm.
That's what differentiates it. I mean, a human body can only move X amount of ways.
Right.
Well, in Wing Chun, we're based off of principles, not techniques. So it's a principle-based system. So you don't have to worry, like I said, you don't have to worry about learning 50 different things before you get to a means to an end. You can learn 2 or 3 things and become a very proficient fighter just with those 2 or 3 things, as long as you train them to, you know, and you can apply it to any situation.
Wow, that is amazing.
Yeah, we are based on principles, not techniques.
Wow.
So you don't, you know, people come in here and ask me all the time, how long does it take to get to be a black belt? Well, first of all, we don't have black belts here, we have sashes. And if you're looking for that rank, then go down the street and I'm sure somebody will give it to you. We don't do that here. I said, you know, if you want to take the time and learn, this is what we offer here.
Right.
You know, I don't test every month like a lot of schools do. I don't test every 3 months like a lot of schools do. My guys, they can care less about it. They don't even ask me about testing.
Really?
I've got guys in here that have been with me for 3 years and still wear their white sash. They can care less, to be quite honest. They just want to learn. And I think that's very, very admirable.
That is. Just not really caring about the status, but caring
Right.
about the art and caring
Exactly.
about
Your own personal growth.
Right.
Right. What good is a belt around your waist if you can't use it? That's what I care most about, is if you learn 2 or 3 things, take those and get really, really proficient at it.
Right.
You know, that's really the best way I can describe it.
That's true. And what are some values that Wing Chun brings to your students? Like, how do you see progression in their life when you see somebody come here, doesn't know anything about Wing Chun, you've
Yep.
had them for over 6-7 years.
Yep.
Like, what is it that you see that Wing Chun
That's
values?
a great question. I have a lot of guys in here that are executives for their own business, or they work for a business and they're executives, or we have a lot of police officers or law enforcement. So I got a lot of guys in here that come in and they're very stressed throughout the day. And they come here, and by the time they leave, they're a totally different person.
Wow.
They walk in here, you know, they're in a bad mood, they're stressed about their job. Excuse me. They'll walk in here, they'll leave, and they're happy as a clown. And they'll tell me that, they'll say, Dave, you know, I can't thank you enough. This has really, really impacted my life, my family life. I'm much happier at home now. You know, I'm much easier to deal with. I have a lot of stress at work. I have one of these jobs that's just very stressful. I have X amount of people working for me. I've supervised an entire floor. Before I was, you know, it was very difficult for me to just go straight home. I needed an outlet. And they'll call me up and they'll say, thank you so much. You really,
That's awesome.
you know, you really helped me. My wife is much happier. My health hasn't been better. My blood pressure is much lower. Those are the kind of stories I like to hear.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Just giving value to everyday life. Giving somebody the rebirth of saying, wow, you know what, I'm not too old to do this. A lot of people think, well, you know what, I'm not 12 years old. I can't do martial arts. Well, the beauty about Wing Chun is you could do it when you're 3, you could do it when you're 103. Wow. You don't need to be in peak physical condition. It was the only martial art developed by a female or influenced by a female.
Yes,
it's the only martial art that does not fight force with force. So somebody of smaller stature can actually defend themselves against somebody of larger stature and be very, very successful. I mean, we have girls in here that weigh 90 pounds, and I put them up against some of the guys in here that are 6'2", 6'3", and they do a really, really good job. Because, and the reason why I do that is because what's the point of me putting them up against somebody their same height, You know what I mean? I want them to know that they can defend themselves against a larger and
Give
stronger.
them that confidence.
Exactly. Exactly. Give them the confidence, but also give them